Another piece of evidence that Jesus rose from the dead is that his tomb was found empty 3 days later. Matthew 28, 1-4 says, "Now after the Sabbath, at dawn on the first day of the week, Mary Magdalene and the other Mary went to look at the tomb. Suddenly there was a severe earthquake, for an angel of the Lord descending from heaven came and rolled away the stone and sat on it. His appearance was like lightning, and his clothes were white as snow. The guards were shaken and became like dead men because they were so afraid of him." So Jesus dies, he's put in a tomb. As this passage shows, an angel rolled away the stone guarding the tomb, and the soldiers guarding the tomb became so terrified that they passed out. Now, the evidence is clear that Jesus' tomb was found empty, but in an attempt to disprove the resurrection, skeptics will say different reasons for why Jesus' tomb was empty, pretty much. They give 3 well-known responses to why Jesus' tomb was empty. And again, this is all an attempt to disprove that Jesus actually rose from the dead. So if they can give some kind of explanation that doesn't involve a miracle of being resurrected, then they want to know that. And that's fair enough. But the most 3 well-known theories as to why there was an empty tomb, as to why Jesus' tomb was found empty, have been, I think, discredited as not reasonable. And so those 3 theories that we're going to look at real briefly are the swoon theory, the theft theory, and the wrong tomb theory. These are the most well-known theories, and in fact, we kind of went over the first one in the last video, so we'll just briefly touch on the next 2. Let me just say this. The swoon theory, just to recap, is the theory that Jesus didn't actually die on the cross. So some skeptics believe that he just fell unconscious on the cross, so he was swooned to sleep. And so they put him in the tomb, and later Jesus reawoke. He woke up, removed the stone, fought off the guards, and convinced his disciples that he actually rose from the dead. But again, without medical attention, without miracles, without the fact that Jesus was, that the evidence shows that he clearly did rise from the dead, the swoon theory just doesn't work. And so we've already seen how it's not a good explanation. The next theory is the theft theory, which is exactly as it sounds. In this theory, skeptics say that the reason Jesus' tomb was found empty was because his disciples stole Jesus' body away, and they lied to everyone that Jesus actually rose from the dead. So they came, they fought off the guards, they rolled away the stone, and then they stole Jesus' body, and then they just made up a lie that Jesus actually rose from the dead and said, look, his tomb is empty. That's our evidence that he actually rose from the dead. But this also fails for a few reasons. It's unlikely that the disciples would be able to defeat the guards at the tombs. So the disciples weren't trained warriors like the guards were. So likely they wouldn't have been able to accomplish that. Next, some will say, well, the guards might have fallen asleep. And that's how the disciples took the body. This is impossible for 2 reasons. First, the noise of rolling the stone away probably would have woken up the guards. And then 2, falling asleep on duty was punishable by death. So if the guards fell asleep when they're supposed to be watching this body, they would be executed. Interesting enough, the Bible does show that the Pharisees, the ones who put Jesus to death, admitted that the tomb was empty. So this is good evidence. We need to know that Jesus' tomb was actually empty if we're going to prove that Jesus rose from the dead. And it's interesting that opponents of Christianity would admit that the tomb is empty. And here's what I mean. In Matthew 28:11, it says, "Behold, some of the guard went into the city and told chief priests all that had taken place. And when they had assembled the elders and taken counsel, they gave sufficient sum of money to the soldiers and said, 'Tell people, his disciples came by night and stole him away while we were asleep. And if this comes to the governor's ears, we will satisfy him and keep you out of trouble.' So they took the money and did as they were directed. And this story has been spread among the Jews to this day." So this passage shows it was about to be made known to everyone that the tomb was empty. And so the Pharisees had to come up with some kind of excuse to say why the tomb was empty. And it's just amazing that more Pharisees didn't believe in the resurrected Jesus because of all of these testimonies. I mean, imagine you are a Pharisee and the guards that you set at Jesus' tomb come to you and say, Jesus' tomb was emptied by an angel, and now Jesus is gone. And yet they still come up with this excuse. Just tell everybody that the disciples stole Jesus' body away. It's mind-boggling that they were so unwilling and had such a hard heart not to believe. But nevertheless, we have this recorded document of the Pharisees trying to give some kind of explanation why Jesus' tomb was empty. The final reason that this theft theory doesn't work is that the disciples would not have been motivated to steal Jesus' body away and lie to everyone that he actually rose from the dead. They believed Jesus was the Messiah, that he was going to overthrow the Roman Empire and restore Israel. Instead, they watched Jesus die a brutal death. They watched him be beaten and scourged and crucified. And now they're terrified that the same thing is going to happen to them because they were followers of Jesus. So most likely they wouldn't be motivated to do something that would get them in trouble and give them the same kind of death that Jesus faced. It just doesn't seem likely that they were motivated by a lie when there was so much threatening their lives. Lastly, we have the wrong tomb theory. This theory is exactly as it sounds. It claims that the women and the disciples and everyone else simply went to the wrong tomb. They went to a tomb that was empty and began claiming that Jesus rose from the dead. This theory just ignores the details of Scripture and the biblical text. For example, Joseph of Arimathea, he was one of the disciples of Jesus, and he asked Pontius Pilate if he could be the one to bury Jesus' body. Joseph put Jesus' body in his own tomb, a new tomb, and it says that it was in the same garden where Jesus had been crucified. So it wasn't far off. It would be very difficult to go to the wrong tomb. If the disciples went to a wrong tomb and they opened it up and they didn't see Jesus' body, they could have just gone to Joseph and said, "Is this the right tomb, or was he somewhere else? Was he put somewhere else?" The other thing is that the Jews and the Romans knew where the tomb was. The Jews asked for soldiers to be put at the tomb, and Pontius Pilate knew where the tomb was. So if people started going around claiming that Jesus rose from the dead when he didn't actually rise, the Jews and the Romans could have easily produced a body and said, "No, he didn't." But that never happened. That never happened. That's not what we see. The evidence shows that the tomb of Jesus was common knowledge. Everybody knew where Jesus' tomb was. And the reason no one could produce Jesus' body was because his tomb was empty. Next, we're going to be looking at the evidence of the appearances of Jesus. Jesus appearing to multiple people. And then we're going to look at the evidence that this led to transformation, radical transformation of the disciples and everyone who met Jesus after his resurrection. Thanks. God bless.